I want you to, like, right now, just picture your medicine cabinet. Just visualize the shelves in there.
Oh, yeah, we all have that exact same shelf.
Right. Chances are, sitting right there next to, I don't know, the toothpaste and the Band-Aids, you got a bottle of something you take for a headache. Or maybe a sudden fever or a sprained ankle.
It's just a staple. It's ubiquitous.
Exactly. It is so common, it's practically invisible. We just take it without a second thought. But what if you knew that swallowing that little pill was like reaching into your own biology and pulling a single massive molecular lever?
A very powerful lever at that.
Yeah, a lever that simultaneously silences your pain, thins your blood, and potentially literally strips your stomach of its natural armor.
It really is, the ultimate double-edged sword in modern medicine. To understand these everyday pills is to understand a fundamental principle of pharmacology.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, there is an absolute inseparable link between therapeutic benefit and serious harm. You just cannot have one without the other.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at NSAIDs.
Yes, we are.
We've got this fascinating stack of pharmacological history, clinical trials, and research right in front of us. And our mission today is to unpack exactly how these drugs fight pain and inflammation on a cellular level.
And we really need to explore the serious, sometimes completely silent risks hiding right behind those over-the-counter labels, not to mention a billion-dollar pharmaceutical disaster we'll get into.
Right, the Vioxx disaster.
Yeah.
It genuinely amazes me how something so incredibly common, like something we confidently give to our kids, is so deeply misunderstood by most of us.
Well, I mean, that misunderstanding really starts with the very name of the drug class itself. Before we can even dive into how they manipulate your cells, we have to look at how we define them.
So NSAID stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. And if you pause and just think about it, that is a bizarre way to name something.
It really is.
Because it defines the drug entirely by what it isn't. I mean, that feels like classifying every single vehicle on Earth that isn't a train as a non-train transport device.
That's a great way to put it, actually.
Right. You'd have bicycles, skateboards, and Boeing 747s all lumped together just because they aren't trains.
Yeah, the name is purely a historical accident. It's based entirely on what terrified doctors in the mid-20th century.
Wait, terrified them?
Yeah, so back then, the dominant anti-inflammatory drugs were corticosteroids. Things like cortisone.
Okay, steroids.
Exactly. And steroids are incredibly powerful at shutting down inflammation, and this is but they come with a heavy, just devastating side effect profile.
Like, what kind of side effects?
We are talking severe immune suppression, adrenal failure, massive weight gain, and even bone density loss.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when researchers eventually grouped this other class of milder drugs together, aspirin, ibuprofen, naproxen, calling them non-steroidal was just a really convenient marketing term.
Ah, so it was a way to reassure doctors and patients, like, hey, at least it's not a steroid.
Precisely. It communicated safety by comparison, but it told you absolutely nothing about the drug's actual mechanism.
Right. And to get to the actual mechanism, the origin of these drugs, we have to go way, way back. We're talking ancient Greece here.
Hippocrates, right?
Yes. Hippocrates, the father of medicine himself, was famously recommending infusions of willow bark to his patients for pain and fever. And the active ingredient in that bark was a compound called salicin.
And if you fast forward a couple of millennia to 1897, you have a chemist named Felix Hoffmann working at the German company Bayer.
Right, because the raw willow bark was pretty rough to take, wasn't it?
Oh, very much so. It was notoriously harsh on the stomach. But Hoffmann managed to synthesize a more stable, slightly less irritating version called acetylsalicylic acid.
Which is a mouthful.
Yeah, so in 1899, Bayer marketed it under a brand name you definitely have in your house right now, aspirin.
Aspirin. It goes on to become literally the best-selling drug in history. But, ibuprofen has arguably an even more relatable origin story.
Oh, I love this story.
Yeah, it was developed much later in the 1960s by a chemist named Stuart Adams working at Boots, UK. According to the historical accounts in our sources, he actually tested an early version of his newly developed drug on himself.
Yep, to treat his own hangover before a big speech.
A very practical, if highly unorthodox clinical trial.
Seriously. But the striking part of this history, though, is the timeline itself. Aspirin was a blockbuster drug for much of the 20th century. People took it for everything.
Right.
Yet for over 70 years, nobody actually knew how it worked.
See, I am struggling to wrap my head around that. 70 years of global, widespread use, completely flying blind. We just knew it made the pain stop.
That's right. It wasn't until 1971 that we figured it out.
How did we finally crack the biological code?
Well, the breakthrough came from a British pharmacologist named John Vane. He was working at the Royal College of Surgeons, and he published this landmark paper in the journal Nature.
And that paper solved the mystery.
It did. It fundamentally changed our understanding of human biochemistry. Vane discovered that aspirin works by inhibiting the body's synthesis of prostaglandins.
Prostaglandins. Okay,
Yes.
let's define those because they're the main characters of this story. These are hormone-like molecules involved in signaling pain and triggering inflammation, right?
Exactly. They are basically the body's chemical messengers for localized distress.
So how did he prove that?
He did it with a brilliantly concrete experiment. He used isolated guinea pig lung tissue and demonstrated that when he introduced aspirin and another early NSAID called indomethacin, the tissue just stopped releasing these prostaglandin substances.
Like, completely stopped.
Well, it happened in a dose-dependent way. So the more drug he added, the more the production shut down. He proved it wasn't some vague, healing aura. It was a direct physical inhibition of a specific enzyme.
Wow. And that discovery was so monumental, it earned Vane the 1982 Nobel Prize.
It sure did.
Okay, so this specific enzyme that Vane implicated, it's called cyclooxygenase. Let's just call it COX for short.
Good idea. Much easier to say.
Yeah, so let's slow down and walk through this biochemical pathway, because this right here is the master switch for everything. Step 1, let's say you sprain your ankle. You have physical cell damage.
Right.
Step 2, this biological scissor called phospholipase A2 comes along and cuts free a specific fat molecule called arachidonic acid, which normally is locked safely away in the cell's outer wall.
Right, and once that fatty acid is cut free and it's just floating around, step 3 is where our master switch flips.
The COX enzyme.
Yes, the COX enzyme grabs that freed arachidonic acid and chemically converts it into a new molecule called prostaglandin H2.
And that single conversion cascades into a whole family of downstream molecules, right? All rushing out to do different jobs.
Exactly. They are like a specialized work crew scattering to do their specific tasks.
And these downstream molecules have wildly different day jobs depending on where they are in the body.
Yeah.
Like you've got PG2, which runs over to your nerve endings, sensitizes them to pain, and then runs up to your brain to turn up the fever thermostat.
Yep, that's the pain and fever guy.
But then you have PGI2, which does something completely different. It protects your stomach lining from its own acid and keeps the blood vessels in your kidneys wide open.
Crucial for survival, yeah.
And then you have thromboxane A2, which acts like molecular glue, making your blood platelets clot together to stop bleeding.
And this right here is the defining concept of the entire drug class. NSAIDs block that initial COX enzyme. They just jam the gears.
They stop the factory manager.
Right. And by blocking COX, they stop the production of all those downstream molecules. So that glorious reduction in your sprained ankle pain and your fever, that comes from the exact same mechanism that shuts down your stomach's protective lining. You cannot separate the good effects from the bad because they share the exact same biological bottleneck.
See, I have to pause here and challenge the logic of this biological design.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm the body, why would I use the exact same enzyme to trigger a fever, which I am actively trying to get rid of, and to protect my stomach lining, which I desperately need to survive?
It does seem counterintuitive.
Right. It's like hiring one factory manager to manufacture both the fire alarms and the fire extinguishers. And if you fire the manager to stop the alarms, you lose the extinguishers too. It seems like a massive evolutionary design flaw.
It certainly looks like a flaw when you introduce a synthetic drug trying to isolate just one outcome. But, evolution is incredibly economical.
Economical how?
Well, it doesn't build completely separate, redundant pathways for every single function if it can avoid it. It uses a single, highly conserved biochemical pathway to mediate immediate, localized responses to stress and injury across the entire body.
So it's just being efficient.
Exactly. The body assumes you want the fire alarm to ring when there's damage. It never anticipated you swallowing a pill to chemically silence the manager.
That makes sense.
Incidentally, this is why those corticosteroids we mentioned earlier are so dangerous. They block this entire process further upstream. They stop the biological scissors from even freeing the fat molecule in the first place.
Oh, so they shut down even more downstream pathways.
Exactly, which is why they are so powerful, but incredibly destructive to the immune system over time.
Okay, so all NSAIDs target this same factory manager, the COX enzyme. You'd logically assume they all jam the gears in the exact same way.
You would think so.
But according to our sources, one of the oldest drugs in the cabinet is entirely unique in how it attacks this enzyme.
Yeah, aspirin is a fascinating outlier. So most NSAIDs in your cabinet, like ibuprofen or naproxen, they bind to the COX enzyme reversibly.
Reversibly.
Yeah, think of it like a car parking in a driveway. The drug parks in the enzyme's active site, blocks any arachidonic acid from getting in, but eventually it backs out, lets go, and washes out of your system.
And the enzyme just goes right back to work.
Exactly.
But aspirin doesn't just park. Aspirin is essentially an irreversible assassin. It physically alters the enzyme.
It permanently breaks it. Aspirin chemically attaches a tiny molecular cap to the active site of the COX-1 enzyme. The gears are permanently jammed. Now, for most cells in your body, this isn't a huge crisis because most cells have a nucleus with DNA. When they sense their COX enzymes are permanently broken, they just read their DNA blueprint and manufacture a fresh batch of enzymes.
But wait, I'm remembering my high school biology here. Blood platelets don't have a nucleus.
Ding, ding, ding. They are essentially just cellular fragments floating in the bloodstream. Because they have no DNA, they cannot manufacture new proteins.
Oh, wow. So what happens?
So a single dose of aspirin permanently cripples a platelet's ability to produce thromboxane, that clotting glue, for the absolute entirety of that platelet's lifespan.
Which is how long?
About 8 to 10 days. The platelet is permanently altered until the body naturally recycles it.
This detail completely bridges the gap to the cardiology connection. Taking 75 to 100 milligrams of low-dose aspirin every day for your heart is fundamentally a different clinical therapy than taking 600 milligrams of ibuprofen for a swollen knee. Even though they sit right next to each other on the pharmacy shelf, that low-dose aspirin is being used specifically because it acts as a permanent assassin against platelet clotting.
Exactly right.
And the antithrombotic trialist collaboration meta-analyses proved this beyond a doubt. Low-dose aspirin prevents heart attacks and strokes because of this permanent crippling effect.
It's really one of the best documented therapeutic effects in cardiovascular pharmacology. But of course, the catch remains.
Right, the stomach.
Yes. Taking aspirin every single day, even at a low dose, still suppresses those protective stomach prostaglandins. The stomach issues were still a major problem. And in the 1990s, pharmaceutical companies thought they could finally outsmart this deeply ingrained biology.
They thought they could get the pain relief without the stomach damage. The ultimate holy grail.
Exactly.
Which leads us directly into one of the most sobering disasters in pharmaceutical history.
Yeah, the stage was set by a major discovery in 1991 by researchers Daniel Simmons and Harvey Hirschman. They realized our factory analogy was slightly incomplete. Well, there isn't just one COX factory manager. There are actually two subtly different versions of the enzyme.
COX-1 and COX-2.
Right. COX-1 is the constant housekeeper. It's running all the time in the background, protecting the stomach lining and regulating blood flow in the kidneys.
And the other one?
COX-2, on the other hand, is largely dormant. It acts like an emergency responder. It only wakes up and gets manufactured in large amounts during active inflammation or injury.
Man, you can almost see the light bulbs going off for the drug companies. Like, wait, if we build a highly targeted drug that selectively blocks only the COX-2 emergency responder, we can stop the arthritis pain and the inflammation, but we leave the COX-1 housekeeper completely alone to protect the stomach.
That was the multi-billion-dollar pitch right there. And
Yeah.
Merck developed exactly this with a drug called Vioxx, which received FDA approval in 1999.
And did it work?
In terms of its primary goal, it was a massive success. It did spare the stomach, but the designers missed a fatal, highly complex detail of human biology.
Which was?
It turns out COX-2 isn't strictly an emergency responder for pain. It actually has a day job in the walls of our blood vessels, helping to manufacture prostacyclin.
And earlier, we noted that prostacyclin keeps blood vessels wide open. It's an anti-clotting molecule that protects the cardiovascular system.
Right. So by heavily blocking COX-2 with Vioxx, the drug shut down the anti-clotting prostacyclin. But because it specifically left COX-1 untouched, the thromboxane factory, the clotting glue in the platelets, was still running at full speed.
Oh, no.
Yeah. They accidentally tilted the entire cardiovascular system of the patient into a dangerous pro-clotting state.
I really want to anchor this to the listener right now. Because we aren't just talking about abstract enzymes here. We're talking about millions of everyday people.
Real people.
Grandparents who just wanted their knee arthritis to stop hurting so they could walk around the block. They were handed a shiny new, supposedly safer drug by their doctors, completely unaware that their blood was quietly being pushed into a state where it wanted to clot.
It's heartbreaking.
And this all came to a head in the year 2000 with the Vigor trial. The agonizing irony here is that this trial was specifically designed to prove Vioxx was safer for the stomach than an older drug, naproxen.
Right, that was the whole point.
But instead, the data accidentally revealed a roughly four-fold increase in heart attacks in the Vioxx group. A four-fold increase.
It was staggering.
It just begs the question, how could the initial pre-approval clinical trials possibly have missed a flaw this massive?
Well, it highlights the inherent limitations of clinical trials, even really rigorous ones. Pre-approval trials are usually run on smaller, relatively healthy, carefully selected groups of patients for short durations.
So they weren't looking long-term enough.
Basically. They are optimized to find acute, immediate toxicity like liver failure, but a systemic imbalance like slowly tilting the blood toward a clotting state that might only become statistically visible when you deploy the drug at an incredible scale.
Right, giving it to millions of diverse older people with underlying heart conditions over the course of several years.
Exactly. The fallout was absolutely devastating. Vioxx was pulled from the market globally in 2004.
And the numbers are terrifying. According to estimates by FDA safety reviewer David Graham, which are cited in our sources, Vioxx may have contributed to tens of thousands of excess serious coronary heart disease cases in the U.S. alone.
Just massive.
Tens of thousands of heart attacks, just from trying to outsmart the stomach side effects of a painkiller.
It remains a textbook case study in drug safety and pharmacovigilance. It proved at a terrible cost that you just cannot easily isolate these deeply intertwined biochemical pathways without triggering secondary consequences.
Okay, so Vioxx showed us the disaster of trying to spare the stomach and accidentally wrecking the heart. But let's look at the standard non-selective NSAIDs.
The ones people actually use today.
Yeah, the ibuprofen and naproxen sitting in your cabinet right now. What are the biological costs happening in your stomach and your kidneys when you take them?
Well, the gastrointestinal risk is definitely the most common serious issue. Think about the environment of the stomach. It is constantly bathing in its own highly corrosive hydrochloric acid to digest your food.
Sounds brutal.
It is. And it only survives this daily acid bath because those COX-1 prostaglandins continuously stimulate a dynamic protective shield.
Made of what?
It's made of mucus, bicarbonate to neutralize the acid, and healthy blood flow to repair the tissue.
So when you take an NSAID, you weaken that mucus shield and constrict the blood flow, but the acid just keeps pumping out at the exact same volume.
Yeah, the mismatch is immediate. The acid begins to eat into the stomach wall, causing erosions, ulcers, and GI bleeding. But, and this is crucial, what makes this truly dangerous for patients is that NSAID-induced ulcers are frequently completely silent.
Yeah, I was reading the clinical notes on this, and the scariest part isn't just the physical bleeding, it's that you might not even feel it happening.
Exactly.
Patients will present to the emergency room with massive, life-threatening stomach bleeding, having experienced absolutely zero prior stomach pain.
Because the NSAI is a painkiller.
Right. It is exactly like taking the batteries out of your smoke detector while simultaneously starting a grease fire in your kitchen. Because you took the painkiller, you literally turned off the nervous system's alarm network while the stomach lining was actively burning away.
That silent damage is exactly why you'll often see doctors proactively co-prescribe a proton pump inhibitor, a PPI, alongside long-term NSAI prescriptions.
To stop the acid.
Right. The PPI fundamentally shuts down the stomach's acid production, giving the weakened stomach lining a fighting chance to survive without its prostaglandin shield.
Man. Okay, let's talk about the kidneys, because that mechanism is equally fascinating. If prostaglandins dilate blood vessels to protect the stomach, do they regulate blood flow in the kidneys too?
They do, but with a really crucial caveat. In a healthy, fully hydrated person walking around normally, prostaglandins aren't doing the heavy lifting for kidney blood flow.
Okay, so when does it matter?
It matters if a patient's system is under physiological stress. So if they are severely dehydrated, if they have congestive heart failure, or if they are taking diuretic medications, the kidneys sense a drop in fluid volume.
They panic.
Exactly, they panic. And they suddenly rely heavily on locally produced prostaglandins to dilate the incoming blood vessels. This emergency vasodilation keeps blood flowing into the microscopic filtering units of the kidney.
So if you are dehydrated and you take an ibuprofen for a headache, you block that emergency vasodilation. You clamp down the incoming pipe and essentially starve the kidney of blood.
Yes, exactly.
Which brings us to a terrifying clinical phrase in the sources, The triple whammy.
It sounds colloquial, I know, but in nephrology, it refers to a highly dangerous combination of three very common medications.
Which are?
An ACE inhibitor, or an ARB, which are standard blood pressure medications, a diuretic, and an NSAID.
Okay, let's break down the plumbing of why combining those three is so disastrous.
Sure. Think of the kidney's filtering unit as a pressure chamber with a pipe coming in and a pipe going out. To filter blood, you need high pressure inside that chamber.
Right.
Blood pressure medications like ACE inhibitors work by opening up the exit pipe, letting pressure out. Diuretics lower the overall fluid volume in your whole body.
And then you throw in an NSAID, which we just established, clamps down the entrance pipe?
Exactly. You constrict the flow in, you widen the flow out, and you drop the total fluid volume. The pressure inside the kidney filter completely collapses. It just stalls.
That sounds really bad.
It is. When you combine all three, it can precipitate acute kidney injury in a matter of days. It can send a patient into renal failure, even if they had perfectly healthy kidneys the week before.
Given all this systemic chaos, starving the kidneys, causing silent stomach bleeding, permanently altering blood platelets, we had to clear up some major misconceptions. People treat these drugs like candy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they're sold over the counter, there's a massive assumption that they're basically harmless.
That OTC label is highly conditional. It merely reflects a safety margin for short-term use at very low doses. It absolutely does not mean risk-free.
So they still cause harm even if you can buy them at a gas station.
Yes. NSAID use is responsible for sending hundreds of thousands of people to the emergency room every single year, primarily for those GI bleeds and acute kidney injuries we just broke down.
So if ibuprofen and naproxen are doing all this heavy lifting and carrying these risks, what about the other bottle sitting right next to them in the cabinet?
You mean acetaminophen?
Right, it's acetaminophen, also known as Tylenol or paracetamol. A lot of people treat it like it's just a weaker version of an NSAID.
It is not a true NSAID at all. It is a really fascinating pharmacological boundary case. Acetaminophen has a negligible anti-inflammatory effect.
So it won't help my swollen ankle.
No, it doesn't reduce swelling in a sprained ankle. It doesn't thin your blood by permanently attacking platelets, and it doesn't strip the stomach of its protective mucus shield.
So how does it work?
Honestly, the mechanism of how it stops pain in the brain is actually still only partially understood by science.
Wait, really? We don't fully know.
Not completely, no. But we do know it carries its own extreme danger, a severe risk of acute liver toxicity in an overdose situation. And that is completely unrelated to the COX pathway NSAIDs use.
Okay, that's wild. What about the asthma connection? I noticed in the clinical data that taking a standard NSAI can inexplicably trigger a severe asthma attack in certain sensitive people. How does a stomach and pain drug constrict your lungs?
It comes down to basic biological traffic control, something called the shunt.
The shunt?
Yeah. Remember our locked fat molecule, arachidonic acid? When the biological scissors cut it free, it normally goes to the COX factory. But when you swallow an NSAI and blockade the COX factory, that freed fatty acid has nowhere to go.
So it just piles up.
Exactly, it piles up. So in sensitive patients, the body reroutes all that raw material down an alternative metabolic pathway. And that secondary pathway churns out molecules called leukotrienes.
And what do those do?
Well, leukotrienes are incredibly potent constrictors of the smooth muscle in the airways. So you block the pain pathway and you accidentally flood the lung constriction pathway.
The interconnectedness of this is just staggering. We've been talking entirely about how this works in adults, but there was a period in history where we realized children's biology handles this COX blockade very differently, right?
Yeah.
With terrifying results.
Yeah, you're referring to Reyes syndrome. In the 1970s and 80s, pediatricians began noticing a terrifying link between giving aspirin to children recovering from common viral illnesses like the flu or chickenpox and a rare but often fatal condition.
What did it do?
It caused massive brain swelling and acute liver failure.
And because the data was initially purely observational, just doctors noticing a pattern, there was massive pushback from the industry, right?
Oh, there was intense skepticism. Proving causation is incredibly difficult. But public health officials looked at the severity of the brain swelling and decided not to wait for perfect data.
So they acted on the observational data.
Yes. They issued massive, widespread warnings against giving aspirin to children with fevers. Aspirin use in pediatrics plummeted almost overnight, and the cases of Reyes syndrome essentially vanished with it.
Wow.
It really stands as one of the great public health successes of the 20th century.
Well, we've literally traced this from a piece of ancient Greek willow bark to a modern masterclass in systemic pharmacology. We've seen that you cannot separate the perceived magic of shutting down that cyclooxygenase enzyme from the biological costs exacted on the stomach, the kidneys, and the cardiovascular system.
It really serves as a humbling reminder that our bodies are deeply integrated, highly evolved networks. A single molecular target, the COX enzyme, sits right at the crossroads of immense therapeutic relief and potentially fatal harm.
You touch one thread and the whole web vibrates.
Beautifully said, yeah.
The next time you reach for that bottle of ibuprofen for a lingering headache, just take a second to appreciate the immense systemic biochemical cascade you're about to pause in your own body. Which leaves us with a final, slightly philosophical thought to ponder.
I'm intrigued.
If blocking this COX enzyme successfully reduces our suffering and pain, but simultaneously dissolves our stomach lining and starves our kidneys of blood, what does that actually say about human evolution?
That's a deep question.
It forces us to realize that our body's emergency alarm system, pain, fever, and inflammation, is structurally woven into the very fabric of our vital organ protection. Perhaps biology is sending us a clear message here.
That pain has a purpose.
Exactly. Pain isn't just an annoying symptom to be muted so we can get back to work. It is deeply physically entangled with our actual survival mechanics. We simply cannot hack the alarm system without inadvertently dismantling the fortress itself.
I love that.
Think about that the next time you reach for that molecular lever in your medicine cabinet.